Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Heritage and looked out at the massive space station ahead of them. The station was bigger than any city he had ever seen back on Earth. Around it floated hundreds of alien ships that looked like they came from dreams or nightmares. Some ships moved like liquid metal that changed shape as they flew. Others had so many weapons sticking out of them that they looked like metal porcupines. The Heritage looked old and ugly next to all these fancy alien vessels. Jake had been captain of the Heritage for 15 years. The ship was 70 years old and showed every day of it. The hull had scratches and dents from battles that happened before Jake was even born. The paint was faded in some places and completely gone in others. When other captains saw the Heritage, they usually asked if it still worked or if it belonged in a museum. Commander Lisa Grant walked over to Jake and handed him a data pad. She had been his first officer for 8 years and knew him well enough to see that he was thinking hard about something. Lisa was one of the best officers in the human fleet, but she had chosen to stay on the Heritage because she believed in what they were doing. The alien fleet commanders want to have a meeting, Lisa said. They want to discuss battle plans for the upcoming mission. Jake nodded and looked around his bridge. Lieutenant Paul Walker sat at the communications station. He was young but good at his job and could speak 6 different alien languages without needing the translator. At the navigation station, Kate Thompson was plotting their course through the crowded space around the station. She could fly the Heritage through an asteroid field blindfolded. Rick Hughes ran the weapons systems, and Danny Miller worked down in the engine room, keeping their old reactors running. "Put me through to the Coalition Command," Jake told Paul. The main screen flickered and showed Admiral Vex. The Coran Admiral had 4 arms and stood over 8 feet tall. His skin was gray and covered in scales that made him look like a walking lizard. Behind him, Jake could see other alien commanders from different species all gathered in what looked like a war room. Admiral Vexstar looked at Jake for a long moment before speaking. "Captain Morrison, your ship appears to be quite old. Are you certain it can handle modern combat operations?" Before Jake could answer, another voice came through the speakers. Captain Zilmoth of the Zephyrian Fleet appeared on a smaller screen. Next to the Admiral, his people looked like they were made of liquid silver and could change their shape at will. "Admiral, I must agree. The human vessel's energy signature is so weak that our sensors barely register it as a military ship. Perhaps it would be better suited for cargo transport." More laughter came from the other alien commanders. Jake heard someone say that the Heritage looked like it belonged in a scrapyard. Another voice mentioned that human technology was at least 50 years behind everyone else. The comments kept coming, and each one made Jake's crew look more angry. "The Heritage has served in the human fleet for 70 years, Jake said calmly. "We have fought in 12 major battles and won all of them. We are ready to do our part in this mission, Admiral." Vexstar made a gesture with 2 of his 4 arms that Jake recognized as dismissive. "Very well, Captain Morrison. Your ship may join the rear guard with the supply vessels. Try not to interfere with the actual warships during combat." The transmission ended, and the bridge became very quiet. Jake could feel his crew looking at him and waiting to see what he would do. Paul had turned red with anger. Kate was gripping her control console so hard her knuckles were white. Rick was running angry diagnostics on weapons, systems that worked perfectly fine. Danny Miller's voice came over the intercom from the engine room. "Captain, I heard every word of that conversation. Those aliens have no idea what human engineering can do when we stop playing nice." Jake walked over to the observation window and looked out at the alien fleet again. The Zephyrian ships moved like flowing water, and their hulls shifted color from silver to blue to green. The Coran dreadnoughts were massive rectangular blocks covered in weapons that could probably destroy a small moon. The Thrix vessels looked like giant insects made of crystal that reflected light in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Every one of those ships was newer than the Hereta. Every one had better weapons and stronger shields and faster engines. Every one was built by a species that had been traveling between stars for thousands of years, while humans had only been out here for about a century. "They think we are weak because our ship is old," Lisa said quietly. "They think human technology is primitive because it does not look as fancy as theirs." Jake turned back to his crew. "What they do not understand is that humans build things differently. We do not build ships to look pretty or to impress anyone. We build them to work when everything else fails." Rick looked up from his weapons console. Captain, the Heritage may be old, but every system on this ship has been tested in real combat. These aliens have probably never seen a real fight. Their ships are designed by committees and built in factories. Danny's voice came from engineering. The Heritage was built by people who knew that someday someone's life would depend on every... Bolt and Wire and her Kate plotted their course to the rearguard position, where they had been ordered to wait. Captain, we are being assigned to Sector 7 with the medical ships and supply transports. They really do think we are not a real warship. Let them think that, Jake said. When the time comes, we will show them what the Heritage can really do. Danny, how are our reactors running? All systems are operating at normal parameters, Captain. But if you need more than normal, I can give you more than normal. Jake smiled for the first time since the conversation with the aliens. The Heritage was old and ugly and looked like it should have been scrapped decades ago. But she had something that none of those fancy alien ships had. She had been built by humans who understood that sometimes you need to push beyond what is safe or smart or recommended by the manual. Not yet, Danny, Jake said. Let us see what these aliens are really made of first. Then we will show them what humans are made of. The Heritage moved slowly toward her assigned position in the rearguard. Around them, the alien fleet prepared for battle with ships that gleamed like jewels and moved like poetry. None of them paid any attention to the old human cruiser that looked like it barely belonged in space. That was exactly what Jake Morrison was counting on. The Coalition fleet moved through hyperspace toward the contested system where long-range scouts had detected unknown ships. Jake Morrison sat in his captain's chair aboard the Heritage and watched the countdown timer on the main screen. In 3 minutes, they would drop back into normal space and see what they were facing. Commander Lisa Grant stood beside his chair, reviewing the tactical data they had received. Intelligence reports suggest we are dealing with a new species that calls itself the Devourers. They appeared 6 months ago on the galaxy's outer rim and have been destroying everything in their path. Lieutenant Paul Walker turned from his communications station. Captain, I am receiving final position updates from Admiral Vexstar. The Heritage is ordered to maintain position at the rear of the formation and observe only. Jake nodded but said nothing. He had expected as much from the alien commanders, who still thought his ship was too old to be useful in a real fight. Around them, the other human ships in the fleet were also being relegated to support roles despite having combat records that went back decades. 30 seconds to normal space, Kate Thompson announced from navigation. All ships are reporting. Ready? The timer reached 0, and the stars suddenly appeared around them as the fleet dropped out of hyperspace. What they saw made everyone on the bridge stop talking and stare at the main screen in silence. The enemy ships were enormous. Each vessel was at least twice the size of the biggest Coalition dreadnought, and there were hundreds of them arranged in perfect formations around the system's star. But size was not what made them terrifying. The ships looked alive. Their hulls were black and seemed to pulse with veins of dark energy that moved like blood through arteries. Some ships had what looked like mouths with rows of teeth along their sides. Others had tentacles that writhed in space as if they were swimming through water instead of vacuum. My God, Lisa whispered. They looked like they grew instead of being built. Rick Hughes was running scans from the weapons station, and his face had gone pale. Captain, each of those ships is reading his dreadnought class or larger. The biggest ones are showing energy signatures that are off our measurement scales. Admiral Vexstar's voice came over the fleet communications channel. All ships maintain formation. We have superior technology and firepower. These primitive organic vessels cannot match our advanced weapons systems. Jake was not so sure. Something about the enemy ships made him nervous in a way that had nothing to do with their size or numbers. They moved wrong. Normal ships had engines that pushed them through space, but these ships seemed to glide like living creatures. Their formations were too perfect and too coordinated, as if they were controlled by a single mind. Captain Danny Miller's voice came from engineering. I am reading some very strange energy patterns from those ships. They seem to be drawing power from the star itself before anyone could respond. The enemy attacked. Streams of dark energy erupted from the organic ships and raced toward the Coalition fleet. The alien commanders had been expecting standard energy weapons or projectiles, but this was something completely different. The dark energy passed through the Coalition shields as if they were not there. When the beams hit the hull of a ship, the metal began to dissolve, not explode or melt, but simply cease to exist as if it was being converted into something else. 2 Zephyrian cruisers took direct hits and vanished in less than 10 seconds. The crews did not even have time to send distress signals. A Coran dreadnought tried to raise its shields to maximum power, but the dark energy simply flowed around the barrier and began eating through the ship's armor. All ships fall back, Admiral, Vextor ordered, and Jake could hear panic in the Coran's voice. Regroup at coordinates 77 Alpha. The Coalition fleet began to retreat, but the enemy ships followed them. The organic vessels moved faster than they should have been able to, given their size. Worse, they seemed to be getting stronger as the battle continued. Every ship they destroyed made their energy reading spike higher. Captain Rick called from weapons. I think I understand what is happening. Those enemy ships are converting destroyed matter into energy and storing it somehow. They are literally eating our fleet and getting stronger. Jake watched as another Coalition ship disappeared under the dark energy beams. The Devourers were not just destroying the fleet, they were consuming it. Every ship that died made the enemy more powerful. Lisa, scan the enemy formation and tell me what you see. His first officer worked at her console for several minutes. The ships are arranged in a pattern that maximizes their ability to share energy between vessels. When one ship feeds the others benefit from it. They are not individual ships, Captain. They are parts of a single organism. The retreat was turning into a rout. Coalition ships that had seemed invincible an hour ago were fleeing in panic as their most advanced weapons proved useless against an enemy that fed on energy itself. The Zephyrian ships, with their adaptive hulls, found that adapting did not help when the enemy simply erased whatever they adapted into. The Coran dreadnoughts, with their massive firepower, discovered that more weapons only meant more energy for the Devourers to absorb. Captain Paul reported Admiral Vextor is ordering all ships to fall back to the edge of the system. The Heritage is ordered to retreat with the supply ships. Jake looked at his crew. They had been placed in the rear guard and told to stay out of the way. Now they were being ordered to run while the supposedly superior alien ships were destroyed one by one. Every instinct told him to follow orders and retreat with the others. But Jake Morrison had not survived 15 years as captain of the Heritage by always following orders. Sometimes you had to make a choice between what you were told to do and what you knew was right. Danny, how are our old reactors holding up? Running at standard safety parameters, Captain. But if you are thinking what I think you are thinking, Kate, plot an intercept course for the largest enemy vessel. Rick, prepare all weapons systems. Paul, tell Admiral Vextor that the Heritage is requesting permission to engage the enemy. Lisa looked at him with concern. Captain, if we attack those ships with conventional weapons, we will just be feeding them more energy. Then we will have to use unconventional weapons, Jake replied. Danny, prepare to disable all safety protocols on the main reactors. The chief engineer's voice came back, excited for the first time since the battle began. Captain, I have been waiting 70 years to hear those words. Paul opened a channel to Admiral Vextor. Admiral, this is Captain Morrison requesting permission to engage the enemy. The response came back immediately. Morrison, are you insane? Fall back with the rest of the fleet? Your antique will not last 10 seconds against those weapons. With respect, sir, they have not seen what this antique can really do. Jake cut the transmission and turned to his crew. The Heritage hung in space behind the retreating Coalition fleet, while ahead of them the Devourers continued their advance. In a few minutes, they would be close enough to finish off the remaining ships. All hands, this is the captain, Jake announced over the ship's intercom. We are about to show these aliens why humanity does not build anything with just one setting. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Heritage and watched the Coalition fleet retreat in chaos. The alien ships that had mocked his vessel an hour ago were now running for their lives from an enemy that seemed impossible to defeat. The continued their advance, consuming everything in their path and growing stronger with each ship they destroyed. Danny, disable all safety protocols on the main reactors, Jake ordered. I want everything this ship can give us, and then some down in engineering. Danny Miller had waited his entire career for this moment. For 70 years, the Heritage had operated under strict safety guidelines that kept her reactors running at a fraction of their true potential. Those guidelines existed for good reasons, but Danny had always known that someday they might need to ignore good reasons. Safety limiters are coming offline now, Captain Danny reported. Main reactors are climbing past red line, past critical, and entering territory that is not even on the charts. The Heritage suddenly surged forward with acceleration that should have crushed everyone aboard. But human ships were built differently than alien vessels. Every system was designed to handle stresses that went far beyond the official specifications. The inertial dampener strained and groaned, but held. The hull creaked and flexed, but did not crack. Commander Lisa Grant grabbed her console as the ship accelerated faster than she had ever experienced. "Captain, our speed is increasing beyond anything I thought possible." Kate plotted intercept course for the biggest enemy ship. Jake ordered Rick, charge all weapon systems to maximum power and then keep going. Lieutenant Kate Thompson's hands flew over her navigation controls as she calculated a course through the enemy formation. The Heritage was moving so fast now that other ships looked like they were standing still. Behind them, she could see coalition vessels falling further and further back. Captain Rick Hughes called from weapons. "All systems are charged beyond maximum capacity. The targeting computer is showing error messages, but the weapons are responding." Admiral Vextar's voice crackled over the communications system. "Heritage, what are you doing? Your energy signature is showing impossible readings." "Showing them what human engineering can accomplish," Jake replied. "Paul, cut that transmission. I do not want to be distracted." The Heritage raced toward the Devourer, formation like a medium made of metal and determination. The enemy ships seemed to notice a sudden change, and several of them began turning to face this new threat. Dark energy beams reached out toward the human cruiser, but Kate's piloting skills kept them just ahead of the deadly streams. "Danny, give me a status report on our reactors, Captain. We are now running at 400% of rated maximum. The containment fields are holding, but I cannot guarantee how long. These old reactors were built tough, but we are pushing them into completely unknown territory. How long can we maintain this unknown, Captain?" "Human reactors do not have hard limits like alien designs. We built them to run until they break and then keep running a little longer." Rick's weapons console showed readings that made no sense according to everything he had been taught about ship operations. "Captain, all weapons are charged to levels. That should be impossible. The energy conduits are handling loads that exceed their design specifications by 300%. Then let us give these devourers something they have never tasted before," Jake said. "Fire everything." The Heritage's weapons systems unleashed a barrage that lit up space like a newborn star. Energy beams supercharged by reactors running at impossible levels struck the lead. Devourer ship with force that made nearby space distort. From the energy release, for the first time in the battle, an enemy vessel staggered under attack. The organic hull of the massive ship cracked and split open. Dark fluid leaked into space, and the pulsing veins of energy along its surface flickered and dimmed. "Impossible," came Admiral Vexter's voice over the communication channel. "Those weapon readings show more power than our best dreadnoughts can generate." The wounded Devourer ship tried to absorb the energy from the Heritage's weapons, but found itself overwhelmed. Instead of strengthening the creature, the massive power surge seemed to cause it pain. The ship writhed in space like a wounded animal, and its return fire went wide. Captain Lisa reported with excitement in her voice. "The enemy ship is showing structural damage. Whatever we just did, it worked." Jake smiled for the first time since the battle began. "Kate, bring us around for another attack run." "Danny can. You give me more power, Captain. I am already giving you everything. Plus, whatever's left in the emergency reserves, the backup systems, and anything else on this ship that can generate electricity." But the old girl is holding together. The Heritage came around in a tight turn that should have torn the ship apart from stress forces. Human engineering had built every component to handle whatever punishment the crew could dish out. The hull flexed and bent, but returned to its original shape. The engine strained, but continued pushing the ship faster than it had ever gone. More Devourer ships turned to face this unexpected threat. Dark energy beams reached out like tentacles trying to grasp the small human vessel, but Kate kept them dancing just out of reach. The Heritage was smaller and faster than the organic ships, and her pilot knew how to use that advantage. "Second attack run beginning," Rick announced. "All weapons charged and ready. Fire." Another barrage of impossible energy struck a different Devourer ship. This time, the creature's hull cracked completely open, and the ship began breaking apart. The other enemy vessels seemed to recoil from the destruction as if they could feel their companions' pain. From across the battlefield, other human ships began to take notice. The destroyer USS Defiance increased its own power output, trying to match what the Heritage was doing. The heavy cruiser USS Relentless pushed its reactors past safety limits for the first time in decades. Captain Paul reported, "I am receiving transmissions from the other human ships in the fleet. They are requesting instructions." Jake opened a channel to every human vessel in the Coalition force. "This is Morrison to all human ships. Time to show these aliens what we are really made of. Disable your safety systems and follow the Heritage one by one." The human ships acknowledged the order. The USS Defiance reported safety limiters offline. The USS Relentless confirmed reactors climbing past critical. The escort carrier USS Ranger and the frigates USS Storm and USS Thunder all began showing massive increases in their energy signatures. The alien commanders watched in disbelief as the ships they had dismissed as primitive began generating power levels that their own vessels could not match. Human destroyers started moving faster than alien cruisers. Human frigates began hitting harder than alien battleships. "How is this possible?" Captain Zilmuth transmitted from his retreating Zephyrian vessel. "Those ships should have exploded." From the energy overload, Lisa answered from the Heritage's bridge, "Because humans do not just build machines, Captain. We build partners. Every system on these ships was designed to be pushed beyond its limits. When necessary, the tide of battle began to shift as more human ships joined the attack. The USS Defiance launched torpedoes that had been overcharged beyond all safety recommendations. The projectiles punched through devourer hulls like armor-piercing rounds through paper. The USS Relentless brought its particle beam, a raise to power levels that made space around the ship glow with radiation. When the beam struck enemy vessels, they carved smoking wounds that went completely through the organic hulls. "Danny, how are we holding up?" Jake asked as the Heritage came around for a third attack run. "Captain, these old reactors are singing, but they are still in one piece. Whatever the original designers were thinking, they built these systems to handle more punishment than anyone thought possible. Good, because we are not done yet." The Heritage's successful attacks against the Devourers sent shockwaves through both fleets. The enemy ships that had seemed unstoppable minutes before now found themselves facing vessels that could actually hurt them. More importantly, the Coalition forces saw that victory was possible if they were willing to take risks. Jake Morrison watched as the other human ships in the fleet began pushing their systems beyond safe limits. The destroyer USS Defiance was moving so fast that it left a trail of superheated plasma behind it. The heavy cruiser USS Relentless had increased its firepower to levels that made enemy ships explode instead of just dissolving. "All ships, Jake, broadcast on the general frequency so every vessel in the Coalition fleet could hear. The enemy can be beaten, but you need to push your systems past safe operating parameters. These creatures feed on normal energy outputs. You need to overload everything you have." Admiral Vextar's voice cut in immediately. "Morrison, that is suicide. No ship can maintain those power levels for more than a few minutes. Human ships can," Jake replied simply. "Danny explained to our alien friends what we are doing that they cannot." Down in engineering, Danny Miller had been waiting for this moment his entire career. His voice came over the ship's intercom, so everyone on the Heritage and everyone listening to their transmissions could hear what he had to say. "The problem with alien ship design is that everything is built for safety and efficiency," Danny began. "Every system has automatic shutoffs and limiters and fail-safes that prevent the crew from doing anything dangerous. But humans build things differently. We design our ships to break before they quit." Working Commander Lisa Grant looked at the tactical display and saw that more human vessels were joining the attack. "Our reactors have governors that can be disabled. Our weapons have manual overrides that let us push them past their design limits. Our engines are built to run hot and hard when we need them to, Lieutenant Kate." Thompson pulled the Heritage into another impossible turn as dark energy beams reached out for them. "Captain, the alien ships are trying to adapt to our tactics, but they cannot match our maneuverability." Because their ships are designed by committees and built in factories, Danny continued his explanation. The Heritage was built by people who knew that someday someone's life would depend on every bolt and wire. And Circuit in her Rick Hughes fired another overcharged salvo that punched through 2 Devourer ships like they were made of paper, Captain. The enemy is starting to fall back. They are not used to prey that fights back this hard. The USS Ranger launched fighters that should not have been able to fly at the power levels they were generating. Human pilots pushed their small craft through attack runs that would have killed anyone else from the acceleration forces alone. The fighters weaved impossible patterns through enemy formations and delivered close-range attacks that crippled ships 10 times their size. Lieutenant Paul Walker was monitoring communications from across the battlefield. Captain, I am receiving transmissions from coalition ships. They want to know how they can increase their own power output. Jake opened the channel to Admiral Vexstar. Admiral, your ships are built too well. Every safety system that keeps your crews alive also prevents you from pushing beyond normal limits. Human ships are different. We build them to exceed their specifications when everything depends on it. But how do your ships survive such power levels? Came the reply from Captain Zillmouth. Our computers predict immediate structural failure if we attempted such overloads, Lisa answered before Jake could respond. Because human engineers do not just test things until they work. We test them until they break, and then we build them stronger than that. Every component on this ship has been pushed to its absolute limit during testing. The frigates USS Storm and USS Thunder demonstrated this principle by slipping through enemy lines at speeds that should have torn them apart. The small ships delivered point-blank attacks against Devourer vessels and then escaped before the enemy could respond. Their hulls flexed and bent under the stress but held together. Captain Rick reported from weapons. Enemy formation is beginning to collapse. Several ships are attempting to retreat. Jake could see it happening on the tactical display. The Devourers had built their entire strategy around being able to absorb and convert enemy fire into strength. When faced with human ships generating more power than could possibly be absorbed, their feeding process began working in reverse. Instead of getting stronger, they were being overwhelmed. All human ships continue the attack, Jake ordered. Do not let them regroup. The USS Defiance was now moving so fast that it could circle around enemy ships and attack from multiple angles before they could turn to respond. Its captain had disabled every safety system on the ship and was running purely on manual control. The destroyer's weapons were firing continuously at power levels that turned space around them white hot. Captain Danny's voice came from engineering. I need to warn you that we cannot maintain these power levels indefinitely. Even human engineering has limits. How much longer can we keep this up? Unknown, sir. We are in completely uncharted territory. The reactors could run like this for hours, or they could fail in the next 5 minutes. There is no way to predict. Jake nodded and looked around his bridge. His crew had pushed the Heritage further beyond her design limits than any ship in history. They had proven that human engineering could accomplish the impossible when pushed by human determination. But they were not done yet. Kate set course for the enemy flagship. That big ship in the center of their formation, Captain, that vessel is 3 times our size and showing energy readings that are off our scales. Then we will have to hit it with something that is off our scales too. Danny, I need you to give me everything the Heritage has left, Captain. I am already giving you everything. The reactors are running at levels that should not be possible. The power conduits are carrying loads that exceed their rated capacity by 400%. The weapon systems are charged beyond anything in their operating manuals. Then give me more than everything, Jake said quietly. Give me whatever comes after everything down in engineering. Danny Miller looked at displays. That showed impossible readings. Every safety protocol he had ever learned told him that what they were doing would destroy the ship. But every instinct he had developed over decades of working with human technology told him that the Heritage could take more punishment than anyone thought possible. All right, Captain, Danny said. You want more than everything. You got it. I am redirecting power from life support environmental controls, artificial gravity, and anything else that is not absolutely essential. We are going to hit that flagship with every joule of energy this ship can generate. The Heritage began to glow as power levels climbed beyond measurement. Space around the ship distorted from the energy fields. Other ships moved away from the human cruiser as radiation levels spiked to dangerous levels. Final attack run beginning, Jake announced to his crew. This is what we came here to do. The Heritage raced toward the Devourer, flagship like a comet, made of metal and human willpower. Behind them, the rest of the human fleet followed, pushing their own ships to limits that their alien allies thought impossible. The tide of battle had turned, and now it was time to finish what they had started. The Heritage raced toward the massive Devourer flagship with every system pushed beyond impossible limits. Captain Jake Morrison could feel the ship straining around him as human engineering was tested in ways no designer had ever imagined. Bridge lights flickered as power was redirected from non-essential systems to weapons and engines commander. Lisa Grant watched the tactical display and saw that they were about to face the largest enemy vessel in the formation. The flagship was easily 5 times the size of the Heritage Inn, covered in organic weapons that pulsed with dark energy. It looked less like a ship and more like a living nightmare that had learned to fly through space. Captain Rick Hughes called, "From weapons? All systems are charged beyond maximum capacity. I am showing power levels that are not even on our measurement scales." "Danny, how are our reactors holding up?" Jake asked. Down in engineering, Danny Miller was watching displays that showed readings he had never seen before. "Captain, we are running on power levels that are theoretically impossible. The containment fields are holding, but I cannot guarantee for how much longer. We are pushing every system on this ship into completely unknown territory." Lieutenant Kate Thompson gripped her navigation controls as she guided the Heritage through a maze of enemy fire. Dark energy beams reached out like tentacles trying to grab the small human ship, but her piloting skills kept them just ahead of destruction. "Captain, the flagship is trying to drain our energy, but our output is too high for it." To absorb, Jake smiled grimly as he realized what was happening. The Devourers had built their entire strategy around feeding on enemy ships, but the Heritage was generating more power than any single vessel could possibly consume. Instead of strengthening the flagship, the massive energy output was overwhelming. "It's feeding systems. All human ships," this is Morris and Jake broadcast to the other vessels following them into battle. "The enemy cannot handle our power levels. Pour everything you have into that flagship." The USS Defiance came alongside the Heritage with its own reactors pushed far beyond safe limits. The destroyer's captain had disabled every safety system on his ship and was running on pure determination. Behind them, the USS Relentant and USS Ranger followed with their own impossible energy signatures blazing across space. "One more push," Danny Jake called to engineering. "Give me everything we have left, plus anything you can find, Captain." "I am already giving you everything, plus whatever is left in the emergency reserves, the backup systems, and every spare component on this ship. Now I am going to give you whatever comes after that." The Heritage began to glow with energy that made space around the ship distort and bend. Other vessels moved away from the human cruiser as radiation levels spiked beyond measurement. The old ship was pushing every limit that human engineering had ever conceived. "Final attack beginning," Jake announced. "This is for everyone who said we were too old to fight." Every weapon system on the Heritage fired simultaneously. Energy beams, supercharged by reactors running at impossible levels, created a concentrated barrage that was visible from across the star system. The combined firepower of all the human ships struck the Devourer flagship like the focused output of a star. The massive organic vessel tried to absorb the energy, but found itself completely overwhelmed. Its feeding systems began to overload and fail. Dark fluid leaked from cracks that appeared across its hull. The pulsing veins of energy that ran along its surface flickered and went dark. For a moment, the flagship seemed to hang in space, as if it could not believe what was happening to it. Then it began to break apart. The organic hull split open, and the creature that had been masquerading as a starship died in the vacuum of space. The destruction of the flagship sent shockwaves through the remaining Devourer vessels. The other enemy ships began to retreat as their coordination broke down. Without their leader, the fleet that had seemed unstoppable minutes before turned and fled toward the edge of the system. "All ships, cease fire." Admiral Vextar's voice came over the communications channel. "The enemy is retreating." Jake slumped back in his captain's chair as the adrenaline began to wear off. Around him, his crew was slowly powering down systems that had been pushed far beyond their design limits. The Heritage had survived an ordeal that should have destroyed her, but she was still flying, Danny, status report on our reactors, Captain. They are still running, but I strongly recommend we return to normal power levels before something important breaks. We have pushed these systems further than anyone thought possible. Lieutenant Paul Walker was monitoring communications from across the fleet. Captain Admiral Vexstar is requesting permission to come aboard. He wants to speak with you personally. An hour later, Jake stood in the Heritage's shuttle bay as a Corin transport landed on their deck. Admiral Vexter emerged, followed by Captain Zilmoth and several other alien commanders. The Corin Admiral approached Jake with all four arms spread in a gesture that Jake recognized as profound respect. Captain Morrison, Vexstar began. I owe you and your crew an apology. When we reviewed your ship's specifications, we assumed it was inferior because it lacked our safety features and efficiency ratings. Jake nodded. Our ships are not as elegant as yours, Admiral. They are not as efficient, and they definitely are not as safe. But they were built by a species that has been fighting for survival since we first learned to make tools. Danny Miller emerged from the engine room, still covered in grease and coolant from performing maintenance that should have been impossible during combat. The thing is, Admiral, we do not just build our ships to work, we build them to work when they should not be able to work. Captain Zilmoth gestured toward the Heritage's engine room with obvious amazement. Your power output during the battle exceeded your ship's theoretical maximum by over 500%. Our computers still cannot explain how your vessel remained intact, Rick. Hughes looked up from where he was running post-battle diagnostics on weapon systems that had performed far beyond their specifications, because humans do not just test things until they work, Captain. We test them until they break, and then we build them stronger than that. Lisa Grant joined the conversation. Every human ship is designed with one principle in mind. When everything else fails, you remove the safety limits and see what happens as word of the battle spread throughout the galaxy. Human ships suddenly found themselves in high demand. The vessels that had been mocked for their lack of sophistication were now seen as marvels of engineering that could accomplish the impossible when pushed beyond their limits. Alien species began requesting human engineers to work on their own ships. They wanted to understand how humans could build machines that exceeded their own specifications. But most aliens could never truly grasp the human approach to engineering. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Heritage as they began the journey home. The old ship had proven herself in the most impossible circumstances, and her crew had shown the galaxy what human determination could accomplish. Lisa, Jake said to his first officer as they watched the stars stream by. Remind me to send a thank you note to Admiral Vexstar for what, Captain, for giving us exactly the motivation we needed. Nothing pushes humans harder than being told something is impossible. The Heritage continued on her journey home with her hull scarred, but her crew proud. Behind them, the galaxy would never again underestimate what humans could accomplish when they decided to remove the safety limits and see what their machines and themselves were truly capable of achieving. In the end, the aliens learned an important lesson about humanity. Humans did not build things to impress anyone or to win engineering awards. They built things to work when everything depended on it. And when everything depended on it, humans were capable of pushing beyond any limit that anyone else thought possible.